Hello class 10th. This is your second video of the chapter A Triumph of Surgery. And in the last video we have seen for 2 days Tricky didn't get any food, but on the third day they started feeding him. Till here we have completed. Now we will start from here, from then on. From then on his progress was rapid. From that day his progress, his improvement was rapid, fast. He had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. What is the doctor saying? That he had not given him any kind of medicines. So, what was the treatment given to him? He was only playing with other dogs, running about with them. They would play together, roll over, hit each other. Now the dog is enjoying all these things. Can you see this word? Scrimmages. What does this mean? Means struggle. That friendly struggle that Tricky was having with the other dogs. For example, I'm telling you, like the fight you have with your cousins, your brothers, your sisters, that friendly fight. So that type of friendly uh, struggle he had with the other dogs. But he was liking all that. He was enjoying all these things. He discovered the joys of being bowled over, trampled on, and squashed every minute. He was enjoying all these things. He was now loving all these things. Why? Because he never lived in such conditions. He was a very pampered dog. As his mistress was very rich, she has given him everything in a lavish way. He became an accepted member of the gang, an unlikely, silky little object among the shaggy crew, fighting like a tiger for his share at mealtimes and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. He had never had such a time in his life. As I told you, he was a very pampered dog. But now what happened? He was now accepted by the members. And who are these members? The other dogs. They have accepted him. But before, what happened? They have just snuffled him and have rejected him. But now they have accepted him as the other members. But he was a silky little object. Why he was a silky little object? He was very soft. Why? He was pampered so much. And he was a furry dog. But now he was a brave dog. He share his meal time. He has to fight to get food at meal time. He was sharing his meals and he used to hunt rats in the old hen house at night like other dogs. He had never had such time in his life. This was something new for him, but he was enjoying all these things. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. What happened now? That this Mrs. Pumphrey, she hovered anxiously. Hovered anxiously means stand in the same position. What does this means? That she was always inquiring about Tricky by calling the doctor now and then. She used to call the doctor 1,000 times and ask for the latest news about her dog, Tricky. I dodged questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly, his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to convince her that the little fellow was now out of danger and convalescing rapidly. Now what happens? He used to dodge the question. Dodge means ignore. He ignored the question, that whether his cushions were being turned regularly, he was given the correct coat, he was wearing them or not, and every lavish thing that she was giving him, she was asking about all those things. But what happened here, why this tricky has shown improvement? Because the doctor has just changed his lifestyle. In that way only he is treating him. So he used to ignore all these questions of Mrs. Pumphrey. But he was able to tell her that the little fellow was now out of danger and convalescing rapidly. Convalescing means recovering. Convalescing means recovering. He was, you can see this word written here, this convalescing rapidly. So he was improving rapidly. The word convalescing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring around fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. So, after hearing this word convalescing, she was not satisfied and she thought it is not the exact recovery she was expecting. She thought she had to do something. What she started doing? She started to send fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time. 2 dozen means 24. She used to send 24 dozen to build his dog's strength again, because now what she thought, that the surgery is being done with him and now he has to recover at a faster rate. Then for a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. Can you imagine? The dog was given wine also. So this lady, Mrs. Pumphrey, not only she started sending the eggs, she has started sending the bottles of wine also. Now you can imagine why this dog has turned into a bloated sausage, because of all these things. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. She thought it will enrich the dog's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. What is happening? Because they can't give all these things to the dog, so the doctor and the people who were there as helper, they started having this wine before the meal. Like in lunchtime, they started having the 2 glasses of wine. We could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and revertly drunk. Can you imagine? She used to give him brandy also. After the wine, what is next? Brandy. Then Mrs. Pumphrey started sending brandy, and these people, the doctor and the helpers, they started having brandy also, but at night. So in the mealtime, they have the wine, and at night, they used to have this brandy. There were days of deep content, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing the luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. So they used to have extra egg in the morning, the eggs she was sending, and midday during the lunchtime they used to have wine, and they finished their day, means at night they used to have brandy. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, but I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her the little dog has recovered and was awaiting collection. What they thought, to keep Tricky as their permanent guest. Why they thought that? Out of greed. They were getting eggs, they were getting wine, they were getting brandy. Who would not love it? So, for once, they thought to keep Tricky as a permanent guest. But he realized that Mrs. Pumphrey, as she loved her dog so much, he started thinking that she must be suffering. And after a fortnight, he called her that her dog has recovered and she can come and collect him. Then, within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. Surgery, please just see that the surgery means clinic. Within minutes of calling her, there was a 30 feet gleaming black metal, means a black color uh, car was there outside the clinic. As I told you, Mrs. Pumphrey was very rich. The chauffeur opened the door, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey almost lost in the interior. The car was very big, and who is the chauffeur? The driver. He opened the door, and this doctor, Dr. Harriet, he could only see her in that big. He could only see the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey. He could not see her properly because the car was very big. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Harriot, do tell me the truth. Is he really better?" Then Mrs. Pumphrey asked Dr. Harriot that her dog is really better or not. Then what he said? "Yes, he's fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I'll go and fetch him." What he said? "There is no need to get out of the car. I will bring him." I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling around and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was a little golden figure of Tricky. So the doctor, he went into the house, into the garden, and there were many dogs, and between them, this dog, Tricky, he was also playing with them, and they were waving their tails. When dog is waving their tails, it shows that they are friend with you. So this Tricky, he was also waving his tail. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a lithe, hard-muscled animal. He was keeping up well with the pack, stretching out in great bounds, his chest almost brushing the ground. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed because he was not given wine, brandy, and God knows what all things she used to give him. So he has totally transformed, and he was actually looking like now a dog. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the dog. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. So when he brought Tricky outside the house, the chauffeur, that driver, he was still holding the car open, the gate of the car open, and as soon as Tricky saw his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, he just took off from doctor's hand and took a leap. He jumped and sat on Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. This jumping act show now he is active. She gave a startled "oh," and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licked her face, and barking. When he jumped on Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. She said, "Oh," because she was also surprised to see the transformed dog. And then this dog, he was only transformed by his body. Internally, he was same. And how he showed that? By licking her and showing excitement of meeting his mistress after so long. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushion, coats, bowls, none of which had been used. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window. Tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mrs. Harriet," she cried, "how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery." Then during this excitement, when all these things was happening, the dog was showing excitement to meet his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, after so long. Dr. Harriet was helping the chauffeur to bring out the beds, the cushions, the coats, the bows, which she has sent with Tricky, and none of them were used. As the car moved away, now the car was moving. Mrs. Pumphrey just leaned out of the window and there were tears because now she can see the dog is well. Her lips trembled and she said, "Oh, Mr. Harriet," she cried out of happiness, and she said, "How can I ever thank you? This is actually a triumph or the victory of that surgery, victory of their clinic." Why? Because for the work which has to be done is now done. The dog has transformed and the dog is well now. So this is a story. This is it, the story here about Tricky, the dog, and Mrs. Pumphrey and James Harriet. He is the vet doctor, vet surgeon, and he has written it. I hope this much is clear to you all. Everything is clear. This is a very fun type of story. This is it. You can see these questions that is given here. Think about it and try to solve it. That's it. Bye and take care.